Thank you for coming to today's session on fostering resilience and well-being for academic success. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be sent out by email later today. And today's webinar is brought to you by Human Resources. Human Resources is a worldwide leader in the development and provision of online assessments, student success, and personal development programs. And you can learn more at humanresources.com. We are so pleased to have Dr. Thomas E. Royo Aubrey here today to talk about and give you tips on fostering resilience and well-being in your first year experience or college success class. If you do have any questions or comments, we might be asking you questions throughout the call. You should see a Q&A icon on the corner of your screen, and you can click that, and there's the ability to ask questions, and I'll be monitoring throughout the session today. I'd like to welcome Thomas to today's call, and over to you, Thomas.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for those that are taking your time on a Friday to be here. So I think it's a need for the past couple of years since the COVID pandemic that we need to talk about building resiliency and fostering well-being in the classroom setting. So I'm glad that you guys have an interest and a passion to help your students succeed academically with building the resiliency and building and fostering well-being. So, but to get us started, I'd like to take, before I go over the overview, just a survey. If you could please tell me what community college or university you're teaching at, or what role do you play in those colleges, if at all you're teaching. If not, please tell us what other, what agency you're working at, so that way you can have an idea and kind of tailor our presentation today to our audience. I'll give about a minute for you to do that. Tamara can go ahead and read off what you write, because I can't see on my end what you have written.
Absolutely. Just give people a moment to find the chat window. Should see the question pop up. So we have a student success coaching person here today.
Nice.
With us.
Definitely need coaches, and especially now with our students, there's so many things, and we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges our students are encountering. And we'll also have an opportunity for you to talk about the challenges that you're seeing at your particular school.
And I'm going to put out a second question here of what type of organization you work for. So like Thomas said, whether it's a community college or what your setting is for your day-to-day.
This will give me kind of an idea on how I best can support your students by providing with this webinar. Even if you don't work at a university, if you do somehow, even you may be a student, and so that would help to kind of gauge what the audience is doing. So, and it may be that you're struggling to find the chat features. If that's okay, I hear you.
We do have a couple more answers here. Someone else is a career coach for the Foothill Family Services in Los Angeles County. So it's a nonprofit for families.
Okay.
And we have another person, our student success coach works in a four-year public institution. And I know, Thomas, that you've worked across a very broad number of areas and regions.
Absolutely.
Specialties.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, thank you for those of you that are success coaches to be here. It shows, like I said, the passion that you have for your students and the desire to learn more techniques and learn skills to help your students succeed, especially during these hard times for students. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we're going to consider. We'll briefly touch on some of the things that your students are experiencing. I'm not going to go into great depth because I'm sure you're here to learn some skills, to takeaways. You already know what's going on at your school. You know the challenges your students are experiencing. I do want to hear those challenges, however, so we'll have an opportunity to discuss that in a bit. So we're going to go ahead and go into the why. Why is it so important to teach? In my personal opinion, humble opinion, the importance of teaching resilience and well-being. Then we'll go into the model that I particularly use, and we have used at many colleges, which is the psychological and emotional resilience training. As Tamara mentioned, I had many different roles. I come from the clinical world and then moved into the educational world. And I used my clinical experience to help students succeed. And this is the model that we used in the clinical world, where we helped police officers and firefighters who are exposed to the most extreme and as well as military personnel to the highest levels of stress, to the point that it becomes traumatic stress. And we were helping them build the resilience and well-being to not just protect, but also heal from the effects of their work. And so what I've seen, and I'll talk a little bit about that, is the benefits of teaching our students those same skills that we teach police officers and firefighters and active military, as well as nurses, those that are exposed to high levels of stress. And what we've seen is persistence and completion rates increase for students when they learn these skills. So we'll talk a little bit more about that model in a bit. Well, then, and I believe most of you are here to hear the application component. What are some of the skills that you can learn to help build resilience for your students that you're working with as a coach, or whatever your role may be in working with students? And of course, within an hour and 15 minutes, absolutely, I would not have the time to go over every single tool that we use, because we have an array of tools ranging, and we'll talk about that when we get into the model, ranging to how do we build resilience within the body? How do we build resilience within the mind? How do we build resilience within relationships? How do we build resilience within self-care? And so there, and how do we build purpose and meaning? So that spiritual element that we enhance students for them to become successful, not just in school, but even in their personal life. Too much to consider in just an hour and 15 minutes. But so because of that, I'm going to go ahead and guide you to some resources that you can tap into to utilize within your community college or your private sector, wherever you work at, to help those individuals that you're assisting to be successful. So let me go on to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about completion rates, and then we'll pass the mic or ask the question over to you. What are the completion rates at the college or university or the private sector, what you're working with and helping colleges and universities? What do you see as a common thread? But when we look at national completion rates, because we can take a look at individual completion rates at each college and university, but when we put this together, one particular study did a good job where they took a look at post-secondary completion rates of a 2012 cohort of students. And what they found is that 37%, 37.31 to be more accurate, but 37% of students that are enrolled in that were enrolled in 2012 in a four-year private for-profit university graduated from the university. Now, when we look at a private two-year public college, that's where I work. I am the director for the Behavioral Health Sciences program at Glendale Community College. And when we look at the national rates of completion, it's 39% of students end up graduating from a two-year public college, such as a community college. Now, that's alarming, because if you just take a second and think about that, if someone were to come to you and approach you and say, please invest in my company, and you were to ask them, what's the percentage of me gaining my money back and even earning more money if I invest into this company, and they tell you, well, you only have a 40% chance of earning your money back and even earning money with your investment. And in fact, you have about 60% chance of losing your money and not earning your money back. Would you invest in that company? My guess is that most of you would say no. But yet that's alarming, because that's what we're asking students to do. We're asking them to take out student loans. So they're going to owe and have to pay that money back. And we only have a low completion rate of 40%. So 60% are not going to be earning their money back to even pay those loans that they owe. So that's concerning, because we, and I don't know about your case, but we, and I'm sure that you're in the same situation, and it's hard for us to recommend that our students then invest in that unless we make a change in the academic setting. Now, that becomes very challenging, because what do we change? And obviously, if those of you that have taken statistics, it's almost impossible for us, and Dr. Angela Duckworth said it well, it's impossible for us to disentangle the academic outcome of graduation from social, emotional, physical well-being. We all can say, well, this is the reason why our students are not graduating, because they don't have study skills, because they don't have this. But that's impossible. How do you measure that? How do you set up a study to say this is precisely the reason why our students are not graduating? It may be a combination of everything. And so this is why Dr. Angela Duckworth and others have said what we need to develop is a comprehensive, holistic approach to helping our students succeed. And that's one of my goals and aspirations, is to really to develop a comprehensive approach, a holistic approach to helping students succeed in the academic setting, as well as other settings, because these skills are transferable to other areas of their life. So before I go on to the next slide, let me hear from you. What if you do know this? If you take a guess, if you don't know, but some of you may have looked into the research of what are the completion rates at your school, or even course completion rates. What is that? Go ahead and type that in. What do you believe, or if you do know, are the completion rates, the graduation rates at your school for those that have enrolled, and maybe even course completion rates? And if you don't know, you're welcome to say in the chat, yeah, I really don't know. I haven't looked into what are the completion rates at the particular school that I teach at, or for those of you that are in private institutions helping university and schools, you may not know the completion rates, or whether that's graduation rates or course completion rates of students that you're assisting.
We have an answer of, I believe, 58% on average.
And that's pretty good. That's better than the national average. So, but it's still, what will you invest in an organization only give us about 50% probability of earning our money back. So the point is, and I'm not trying to make distracted, the point is we do need to improve those numbers. We'll move on to some of the other questions. Please feel free to type in the chat, if you can find the chat feature, what you observed. But I also want to know, what are some of the challenges? Because like I said, we can't disentangle all the challenges and pinpoint and say, this is the reason why our students are not completing. This is the reason why, in the case of what we just heard, a little over 40% of our students are not completing. Or in the case of the national rates, a little over 60% of our students are not completing. We can't say this is the reason. We may have gut feelings, but we really don't have any research. It really just weeded everything out in an analysis and say, well, this is precisely the reason. But what we can say is probably more than likely a combination of everything that students are dealing with. So what are some of the things and challenges that your students are facing at your particular university or college?
Or if you're
Or if you're
working
working
outside of
outside of
the
the
college
college
area,
area,
what do you
what do you
find
find
people have
people have
trouble with?
trouble with?
We have an answer of childcare and citizen status. That'd be a big stressor, I would think.
Absolutely, right? And just think about that. Childcare, and as myself as a professor, I'm drilling and constantly telling my students, turn in your homework assignments, and they're having to deal with, will I get deported? Who's gonna, I'm having them and saying you make it to every single class, and they're worried about, where's my children gonna be? Who's gonna be caring for my children? Am I gonna be leaving my children home to come to class? They have bigger concerns than just my homework assignments or coming to class, making it to every class, as I insist the importance of making it to every class. And it's not to say that we want to support them in that, but we need to give them the tools that they can go ahead and deal with that. And some of the tools, it's not providing the physical tools, right? We can send them to give them some resources out there in the community, but it's still stressful. And how do they deal with those stress? And we'll talk about how those stressors impact their ability to learn within the classroom setting. Anything else? Maybe in there, it can be, in other workshops I've done, they say that students are just overwhelmed with the amount of work that they're giving, homework that they're given. That may be a challenge. In their personal life, we just mentioned right now, citizenship. And it may be finances. They probably don't have money to pay for daycare. They may have social problems within the family setting, and struggling with, and then they're taking that into the classroom. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Maybe work, they're unable to find employment, or they lost their employment, which happened, was very common during the COVID pandemic. And then mental and emotional problems. If our students are open with us and approach us, you may encounter that many of our students are struggling with not just mental illness, but emotional problems and even physical health. So there's many things that our students are struggling with. And if you do, feel free to continue typing in some of the things that your students are struggling with. And then this doesn't even touch the iceberg of things that they've encountered during the COVID pandemic, that once many of us are thinking, well, it's gone, I don't believe it's ended. We're still in the pandemic, but and we'll talk about that. Because of what they've experienced, they were exposed to a lot of high levels of traumatic stress. And we see in the literature the effects that traumatic stress, lingering effects, even when the trauma is over, it still lingers in the body. And so our students are still having to deal with the lingering effects of trauma within their body and their minds that they experienced during COVID, such as the racial injustice that we experienced as well, and the civil unrest, as well as the fear for our health. So there's a lot of things, and the point is that there's so much things that our students are experiencing beyond what we believe is important just within our classroom. Well, you need to turn in your homework assignment. They're experiencing a lot that's impacting their ability to be successful within the classroom setting. And as we know, and we've seen this, because of all these stressors that are piling on, and we'll take a look at some of the emotional stressors in a bit, but it makes them more susceptible to emotional and mental health problems. And once they've experienced emotional mental health problems, it's going to exacerbate the situation, and they're going to struggle to to then complete their homework assignments. It just, think about it. If you've ever experienced depression, you don't have the desire to do things. You don't have the energy to do things, to get out of bed and go to class. When you're in that depressive state, you just don't have the desire to do homework. And if you're anxious, it makes it very challenging when your heart is racing and your heart's pounding, you're sweating, and you're just thinking about all the detrimental things that could happen to you. It's hard to focus within the classroom setting. So it makes it challenging if we're struggling with emotional and mental health problems for our students to become successful. So that's why it's so important. I think this is one of the things that we are struggling to address in the community college setting and even in the university setting, because we tend to set aside the importance of mental health. We talk about it and we say, well, go see a counselor. But we don't really address it within the classroom setting and give students the skills that they need to build good mental health and emotional health so they can become successful. And I'm not saying just successful in their academic life, but even in their personal life and within their career in the future. So that's great. I'm saying that students are having all these struggles, but is that the reality? Well, the American College of Health Association did a national survey of hundreds of thousands of students. And what they found in this survey is written here on this PowerPoint slide. Just an overview. About 87% of students in those surveys across various universities and colleges reported that they were overwhelmed by all they had to do. 70%, almost 71% said that they were very sad. So it may not be at the clinical level of depression, but they're saying they're very sad, making it very challenging, right, to be productive in their academic setting or in their personal life. And that's just about 71%. About 66% reported that they're feeling overwhelming anxiety. Almost 66% reported that they're feeling very lonely. About 56% reported that things were hopeless. And then 45% reported that they were so depressed that it was difficult for them to function. And then the last one, 13% reported that they seriously considered suicide. So those are alarming statistics to see that our students are really dealing with a lot of mental and emotional problems within the academic setting. And yet the question is, are we supporting our students in the classroom setting to overcome those? Because if they're dealing with all these emotional and mental health problems, it makes it very difficult for them to succeed in the classroom setting. So going back to the alarming statistic of what's the national completion, it makes sense, given that all they're experiencing, that we're having a lot of students enrolling in college in the university setting, and they're not completing it.
We have a comment, and it's, I wonder what the numbers would be like now since COVID began, because we're all imagining they would have increased quite a bit more and substantially throughout this pandemic.
Yes, and those numbers are just coming in. And I'll point to the research, because I did put, there's going to be at the end a textbook that we'll present that really goes through the curriculum that we're going to talk about today. And in there, I do point to some of the most recent statistics, and yes, they have increased. I wish I'm glad to say that they're not significantly increased, but they have increased nonetheless. But these numbers are already high. So, but they have increased, but it wasn't significant where we saw some of the numbers of suicide rates. I believe it increased about, I think about 15 to 16% now. instead of 13%. But just 1% increase is 1 point too much. We need to increase the numbers are going the wrong way. And that's the hope with this curriculum. And we're hoping that you can build this curriculum into your classroom setting or into your coaching sessions with students so that we can see the numbers go the opposite direction. So then that gets back to, for those of us that have taught within the classroom setting, sometimes where we have this myopia where we think, well, I mean, these mental, emotional problems, or whether there's challenges in their social life that our students are struggling with, or challenges in their career, they're struggling to find work. Well, I'm a teacher. I'm an academia. My responsibility is to teach them math. My responsibility is to teach them English. The emotional and mental health problems, that's somebody else's responsibility. And the fact is, I'd like to change that. That is everybody. This is a community responsibility. And it's the only way that we're going to help support our students to become successful if we come to that mindset that this is a community responsibility. These are the future minds, and we need to help them succeed. And if they're struggling with emotions that's impacting their ability to become successful in the classroom, well, now that's your responsibility as an instructor to help them build the skills to succeed within the classroom setting. Now, the question is, does it really impact the classroom? Let's take a look at how the body functions to give us kind of a gauge of whether these emotional problems or the stressors that they're experiencing that enhances emotional and mental health problems, such as relational problems, such as unemployment, such as inability to, or citizenship, such as, and we mentioned early, unable to find a caregiver to take care of our children. These are stressors. Does it impact their ability to learn within the classroom? And so one of the illustrations that I give students when I teach this material in the college success courses that we teach, or that I particularly teach, is I ask students to just imagine for a second that your instructor brings a tiger into the classroom. And you allow that tiger, as an instructor, to roam around the classroom. And so I said, imagine myself, me as an instructor, bringing a tiger into the classroom, and that tiger is roaring and roaming around the classroom. And at the same time that tiger is wandering around the classroom, I'm attempting to teach you the elements of the periodic table. Now, I ask my students, how many of you will actually learn, if you've never learned the elements of the periodic table till this is the first time you're hearing about those elements, and I'm attempting to teach you those elements while that tiger is roaming around the classroom, how many of you actually believe you would be able to learn those elements for maybe a pop quiz at the end of the class or a midterm at the end of the week? Now, students are bright. They know that's an impossible challenge to do that. Occasionally, I'll have somebody that jokingly will raise their hand and say, "I can do it." And I'll joke back and I'll tell the student, "Well, your survival skills unfortunately suck." But they don't, because that's not the reality. That's not how your body functions. And I explain to students, if you were to eat a delicious, juicy steak right before coming into the classroom, and I then allow that tiger to wander, what's going to happen in the body naturally, because your body diverts energy to where it's more important for survival. First thing, that's the first and primary function of the brain, is survival before anything else, before learning, because it makes no sense if I try to learn right now and don't divert energy to the survival mechanisms in my body, and then I get eaten by the tiger, and then I don't make it for the final exam. That's not how your body functions. It says, okay, what's more important, to digest this steak or to fight or flee from danger? And your body automatically makes a response and decides it's more important right now, survival, than to digest a steak. So digestion starts to slow down. Blood in the stomach starts to flow away from the stomach, and it goes to the thighs to provide glucose for you to run away from the tiger, or to the arms for you to fight the tiger. Hopefully you run away from the tiger instead of trying to fight the tiger. But that's how your body survives. That's how we survive as a human species. The same thing happens in the brain. When we're in a classroom setting, we're expecting our students to have high levels of activity in the high parts of the brain, the neocortex. We want them to have that because if they don't have activity in the higher parts of the brain, they lose access to optimal levels of memory, the ability to encode information that you're teaching them into short-term memory, and then consolidate that, move that from short-term memory into long-term memory. They start to lose access in the higher parts of the brain that allows them to self-reflect. And if you're in a philosophy class or you're teaching a college success class, which you're trying to help change their mindset from fixed mindset to a growth mindset, well, it becomes an impossible task because they've lost access to the reflective parts of their brain that allows them to reflect and change their core beliefs. So, for example, critical thinking, problem solving, things that are essential. That part of the brain starts to, because that tiger is there, just like in the stomach, energy diverts from the higher part of the brain to the subcortical regions of the brain, the lower parts of the brain for survival, the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, and the brain stem for survival. They can then activate, even the amygdala to activate the fight or flight response. And you have those chemical changes that occur within the body that we just talked about, even the blood flowing, digestive system, digestive system, the immune system, all those things start to shut down, all the health sustaining functions of the body. But more important, like I said, within the classroom setting, the critical thinking, the high levels of thinking start to go offline, that part of the brain. And our students struggle to concentrate with good reason because we have a tiger in there. Now, of course, we would never bring a tiger into the classroom, but that tiger is figurative. It really represents all the stressors that it's occurring in their life that they bring into the classroom setting. It really is that argument that they just had with their mother or their father or their boyfriend or their husband or their wife. It's the stress of I have to study for that citizenship, or do I qualify to apply for that citizenship? Those are the tigers that your students are bringing. I don't, who's going to take care of my kids? Those are the tigers that they're bringing into the classroom setting. And what do we see as instructors? We see students who are struggling to focus. They lack focus, they lack concentration within the classroom, and then we come to the conclusion that they just don't want to learn. They're not passionate. And when in reality, it's a normal process that's occurring because they are experiencing these tigers in their life that they're bringing and lugging around with them. And that's not to mention the traumatic stress that students have experienced. Some studies, as researchers as Reed have pointed out, that up to 70% of students coming into the community college report they've experienced at least one major traumatic event in their life that registers within their body. So they're lugging that around as tigers, bringing it into the classroom. Do they feel safe within the classroom environment? If they don't, they start losing access to that higher part of the brain.
I think that's a great lead in to the program that you teach, Thomas. I think you have some slides on that and what it is that people can do within the classroom and within their own setting.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll talk about in a future presentation, we'll talk about what's happening in the system as the nervous system becomes hijacked within the classroom setting. But the point is, as Tamara had mentioned, it's so important that we start building that resiliency within the classroom to help students protect their mind, body, and spirit, so that that way they can flourish within the classroom setting. And so, as I mentioned earlier, what we offer is to help instructors, to help coaches build this resilience and well-being through a model known as psychological and emotional resilience training. And I had mentioned earlier, we had originally worked at teaching police officers, firefighters, active military, nurses, those that are exposed to high levels of traumatic stress. We've seen some amazing results with them. And we've seen the same amazing results with our students. Now, what are the elements? Because there's 6 pillars of resiliency that we help support our students to deal with those tigers in life. And that's the helping them balance, create inner balance of the nervous system with self-regulation. That's one area. So we're working with their body, teaching them body exercises to help them deal with whatever's within their life, their going on in their life. How do we, even though these things are going, how do we manage the nervous system so that when I'm in the classroom setting, I can be present in the moment in the classroom and have access to the higher parts of the brain to learn, to change my mindset, whatever the case, whatever you're teaching, to learn math. But then we also teach them mental flexibility. How do we use not just the body, but the mind to create an inner balance and create a state of calmness and allow us to have access to the higher parts of the brain? But in addition, we also take a look at purpose and meaning. How do we build purpose and meaning so that students can have more motivation to succeed within the academic setting? And then we took a look at how do we even enhance this model with positive psychological strengths. Positive psychological strengths is the word used in the literature when you apply the principles of positive psychology. And what we want, the reason we wanted to do that is because, yes, we do want students in the same way we wanted professionals to be successful within their career. We want students to be successful within their academic life, but we also want them to be happy and develop wellness. So that's why we added the positive psychological strengths to build that happiness, that well-being, that health within their lives. And of course, we also added that social regulation component. How do we teach students to create deeper and more meaningful bonds with their instructors, with other individuals, maybe their family members? They're disconnected with their family members. How do we help them create meaningful relationships, to utilize those meaningful relationships, and even to connect to other types of relationships, such as tutoring? Because I can't tell you how many times when I reach out to college success instructors and I ask, well, I know that you insist on your students going to tutoring, but how many actually take your advice and actually seek tutoring? And what I hear across the board is the ones that actually don't need it actually seek out tutoring. And the ones that need it don't seek out tutoring. And there is a reason behind that. I mean, we're not going to go into that today, but I'll point to the resources and we can overcome those challenges because students just don't trust adult relationships or those in authority. And so how do we overcome those, heal from those past traumatic relationships that are intruding in the present moment, that are inhibiting their ability to connect to tutoring and other types of resources that will actually help them succeed in school? And that's the only way. We can't just tell students, go do it. We have to help them heal in the relationships and build meaningful relationships in the present. Within the classroom setting, we can do that. And of course, the last one is self-care and revitalization. That is really healthy eating, exercise, and even improving sleep. But it's the last element, because if you don't practice these first skills these first 5 skills first, at the end of the day, and we've all experienced that, if we have a stressful day at work, how many of us go home at the end of the day and really desire to eat a healthy salad? Or engage in relationships? We want to just zone out and watch TV because we had a stressful day, and we tell ourselves that we deserve it, right? And we don't practice those self-care, healthy eating, exercise, and even healthy sleep, because it intrudes in our sleep because of the stress that accumulates through the life. So we teach the other elements, and we teach it in a way that you practice it throughout the day So that way you have more energy at the end of the day and more desire to engage in self-care and revitalization. So you can see this program really works with how the mind and body functions instead of against the mind and body, which is typically what you've seen in the academic setting, right? The first thing we want to teach is growth and fixed mindset. That's the mental flexibility. But if they don't have access to the higher parts of the brain, especially self-reflection, how can you change some of the core beliefs? It's something that we've learned in the psychotherapy years ago, that it just doesn't work, and we're barely learning that in the educational system. But now I'm trying to say, learn from our mistakes in psychotherapy, where we'd seen clients after clients and using cognitive behavioral therapy, and people just weren't changing. And now they had to remodify and realize, let's work with the body. Get them access to the higher parts of the brain, right? It's the software. We're trying to teach them software, give or push software, changing their thoughts, changing their fixed mindset. Those are the software, but we're not giving our students the hardware to read the software. So it's just working smart. I'm not going to talk about this, but this is in the classes that we've utilized this resiliency program. We've seen amazing results, from a decrease of anxiety, depression, and perceived levels of stress to enhanced resiliency, mindfulness, and growth mindset, because we're working with the body instead of against the body. So let's go into the application. I'm going to try to at least teach one skill that you can use. I wanted to get to two skills, but I'm not sure if we'll be able to. We'll try. We'll see what we can do. But when we talk about creating an inner balance with self-regulation, what we're talking about is the ability to purposefully create inner balance within the nervous system. I didn't talk about the nervous system earlier, but as our students are encountering stress, and as we encounter stress as well, what's happening is we're having this seesaw, up and down, activated, deactivated of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And that's what drains us out at the end of the day, because it's going up and down as we encounter. And we encounter this even within our relationships. How many times, if you have children, you've seen your children, simple question you can ask your child is, do you have homework? And they get irritated. There goes the sympathetic nervous system, becomes activated. Or we may be in a relationship with our spouse, and this is common. I did a lot of marital therapy. It's common within husbands that their wives will turn to them and say, maybe you shouldn't eat that Whopper. Maybe you should eat a salad more. And then the husbands then become snarky with their wives. Well, I want to eat this Whopper, and instead of being grateful. And that's because they have that activation. They get threatened by the nurturing and caring reaction of their wives. So they perceive that as a threat, and maybe an impingement in their independence to make my own choices in life, whatever the case may be. But their sympathetic nervous system becomes activated, and then their body has to naturally try to balance it out with the parasympathetic nervous system. And then something else happens, right? Your boss tells you, did you turn in your time card? Then it becomes activated. So you have this seesaw occurring, right? Students, right? You tell them, just as a reminder, you have a pop quiz at the end of the day, or just as a reminder, don't forget to turn in your homework assignment by the end of the week. Then their sympathetic nervous system becomes aroused. And then they have to naturally regulate themselves if they know how to. Most of the times they don't know how to, so it's just a slight regulation instead of a major regulation, but it's a constant up and down throughout the entire day where they're exhausted and they've utilized so much energy that they can't engage in self-care activities at the end of the day. So what we teach students how to do is how to relax their body, which will give them, one, it helps better regulate that up and down process within the nervous system. But it also helps them get access or gain access to the physiological states that supports learning, nourishment, rest, and recovery. Recall earlier, if a tiger's in the classroom, blood's going to flow away from the digestive system, from the stomach. Digestive system will start to slow down. Immune system will start to slow down. So healing stops. Learning activity in the higher parts of the brain starts to divert to the subcortical regions of the brain. So learning becomes hindered. Nourishment becomes hindered. It doesn't matter if you're having good, healthy food, your body's not really digesting the food adequately. Rest becomes interrupted. And recovery, as I said, the immune system starts to slow down. So it's no wonder when we're in stress why we tend to get more ill. We tend to have more constant colds. We tend to struggle to memorize things. We tend to struggle to learn. So if we can teach students within the classroom setting how to interrupt this cycle and remain in the health sustaining systems in the body, we can help support well-being, because now they can have better nourishment, better rest, access or optimal activity in the higher parts of the brain, so that way they can learn more efficiently, they can memorize material, they can focus better. Those are the things that we want to do as instructors within the classroom setting. So let's take a look at one particular skill, and this is an acute relaxation skill. And this is the reason why I teach a lot of acute relaxation still instead of deep relaxation. When I talk about deep relaxation, I'm talking about meditation, things of that nature that gives you this deep sense of relaxation. I encourage that. But the problem is that many of our students, and some universities more so and some colleges more so, the students have chaotic lives. And I quickly learned this even in my clinical practice, is that when I tell someone, a patient, to do these deep breathing exercises or meditation skills, and I know the literature shows that if only they would practice that, it would take care of a lot of the problems they're coming to see me with. But you can imagine about 90%, more than 90%, come back when I ask them, did you practice those deep relaxation skills, those breathing exercise that I taught you in the last session? Over 90% come back and tell me, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. And the same thing happens with our students. They have just such busy lives. Many of our students are now working, as we talked about daycare. So they have to care for their children. So not only do they have to work, care for their children, they also are going to school, doing large amounts of homework that we're assigning them. They have busy lives. The last thing on their mind is to sit down and practice those deep relaxation skills that you taught them in the classroom setting. You should teach them, but keep in mind the great majority are not going to practice them. So we have to tailor our techniques to our audience, to our students, to their busy lives. And that's why I created these acute relaxation skills where they're practical, there's opportunities for growth, and it's practiced in real time. They don't have to stop and just think about that. That's awkward. If you're in the middle of a conversation with your boss and you're getting heated, it would be very awkward. And if your boss is getting dysregulated, very awkward if your boss in the middle of the conversation, hold on one second. Hold on. Or let me hook myself up to a biofeedback machine for about 30 minutes and then we'll continue this conversation. So just sit there and let me do that. It's intrusive. So we need to give students who have busy lives some acute relaxation skills. And that's one skill that I'm going to go ahead and teach you right now so that you can teach this within the classroom setting. For those of you who are coaches, teach your students to practice this. But it's so important that they practice it in real time. And we'll talk about what that means in a bit. So it's a simple exercise. It's a body scan. My colleague and I, Dr. Gentry, call it the wet noodle because you're basically just allowing your body to become this wet noodle. And you can do this from head to toe or toe to head. You can start. And all it is that you're in your mind's eye. You don't even have to close your eyes. In fact, I'm doing it now as I'm presenting. So in your mind's eye, take a look at the muscles in your body. You can start with maybe the muscles between your eyebrow. This tends to tense up when you have a lot of tension or anxiety. And just intentionally and deliberately loosen them. The muscles between the eyes. The facial muscles. Is there any tension within those facial muscles? Intentionally and deliberately loosen those muscles. Your neck. Let go of any tension and just loosen the muscles. And you just continue going down the body and scanning any muscle and noticing any tensed muscles and just loosening those. You're the one squeezing those muscles. It's not anyone else squeezing them. Sometimes it may take a little practice to do that because when we're so tensed up, and I've had students like, I can't loosen them. It's just so tense. With continual practice, you'll be able to be connected more to your body and notice which muscles are tensed and be able to loosen those muscles. It'll take some practice. But the more you practice, the better you get at it. And the faster you can get at it, because in the beginning, to have students practice individual muscles. Just notice those muscles, notice your fist. Are they tensing up? Just loosen your fingers. Drop your shoulders, loosen the muscles there. But eventually I help them work with groups of muscles. Your entire shoulder, just loosen them. Instead of working with the muscles in the forearms and the muscles in the bicep. Now it's the entire group of muscles within the arm that you just loosen. But it requires practice to start building that mastery to be able to do that. And eventually you can start a simple technique of just scanning your entire body. Once you've gained some mastery and just loosen the entire body, takes only a couple of seconds. And you don't have to interrupt. You don't have to stop what you're doing. You can do this while you're driving. You definitely don't want to close your eyes and start doing some deep breathing exercise in the middle of traffic because you can have an accident. But you can scan your body. You can do this while you're having a conversation with someone who's irritating you. Scan your body. Notice any muscles and just loosen them. And you're practicing this in real time because you're practicing as you're engaging in these stressful situations. Now, there's the benefit of doing that. Instead of practicing and engaging in some of these exercises after the fact, because a lot of resiliency skills will say, well, after a stressful day, go practice some yoga. After a stressful day, go exercise. Well, I encourage that. The fact is that, as we mentioned earlier, if you engage in a stressful activity throughout your day and your nervous system is engaging in the seesaw activity, you're utilizing a lot of energy throughout the day, which means at the end of the day, you have no more energy to engage in that self-care activities of maybe yoga practicing, going to the gym, or even healthy eating. So we have to engage and do this practice in real time as we're stuck in traffic, and we know that annoys us. As we're engaging in a conversation with someone who irritates us. And that's the protective properties, because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which protects us from expending too much energy and gives us a little bit more energy at the end of the day to engage in healthy activities such as conversations with our families, engaging in conversations with your children, instead of saying, kids, go out there and go out and play outside because daddy had a stressful day at work and he needs time alone. But engaging with our children, engaging with our spouse, engaging with our family, engaging with our friends, those are the self-care activities that we need to build resiliency and health, but we just don't have the energy to do that. And so that's the protective properties. And also by activating the parasympathetic nervous system more frequently throughout the day, we activate mechanisms in the body that also protect us from the harmful effects of stress. That's the protective mechanisms. Police officers are more likely to develop PTSD if their sympathetic nervous system is activated while they're engaged in a traumatic, stressful situation. But if we teach them to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the traumatic material doesn't hijack the nervous system and become embedded as trauma as easily as it would if the sympathetic nervous system were activated. And that's even the case for our students who are watching news. And then they become emotionally activated and with emotional contagion with all the things that are going on in the news. They can protect themselves by practicing this. Now, the healing properties, and that was one of the skills that I wanted to teach you. There's also healing properties with doing this, because we've actually helped students overcome anxiety to math with this simple skill. And so think about this, of how this works and how that's going to help someone overcome their anxiety with math. Every time a student encounters math and they've had maybe some past traumatic experiences with math, which makes reason why they have a lot of anxiety in the present moment with math, they may come to you as a coach and say, what classes should I take next if you're an advisor? And they say, well, you have to take Math 140. And it's like, no, I don't want to take math. I want to take something else. I'm going to leave math towards the end. So they're avoiding it. Right? They're running away from that because their sympathetic nervous system's activating. There's something there. Something is causing them to feel anxiety towards math. And they don't need to sit on my couch, and they don't need to sit in the couch in the classroom to heal from that. They can heal in real time by practicing this simple skill. What's happening every time they come into the classroom setting and they hear the teacher speaking about math or they're doing homework, what's happening is their sympathetic nervous system is becoming activated, which is the reason why we naturally don't like to feel pain. So if my sympathetic nervous system is becoming activated, it's causing arousal, it's causing these unwanted feelings, I'm going to naturally start to avoid doing math and probably watch YouTube all day and then procrastinate and then do my homework assignment at the last minute. But what's happening every time they encounter math and every time they go in class, the sympathetic nervous system becomes activated. So it's a concept of math, sympathetic nervous system. What fires together, wires together. So what's happening is we're strengthening the neural pathways between the two. What you're doing is teaching your students how to reverse that process. And it's a simple skill is I've asked students every time you're in the classroom setting and you're listening to your instructor, do a body scan. Or do another technique that we've learned within the classroom setting, but somehow relax your body and do that every 5 minutes for the 45-minute or an hour and 15-minute, classroom time. So I'll tell them just simply listen to the instructor for a bit, then scan your body, take a second, and it only takes a couple seconds, loosen the muscles, and it's activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and then go right back to giving full attention to the instructor. And 5 minutes later, go back and scan your body, loosen any tight muscles, and continue doing this throughout the entire class. What are we doing here is now, instead of activating the parasympathetic system, the sympathetic nervous system, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. If we continue doing that over and over again, we start to desensitize from the anxieties of math, whether it's anxieties that occurred in the past or present. It's the same technique we do when we treat trauma, and we're helping students overcome their anxieties of math. And I've seen students who will completely freeze on and not be able to answer a single question on the exam and fail exam. We've tried this technique, and I've seen students then retake the math class, practice this over and over, and get to the midterm or final exam and start answering questions. They start to heal, and anxiety starts to dissipate with a simple technique that we're teaching them. So don't discard the power of this technique. It can be utilized for many things to desensitize. One of the things that I do in the classroom setting, I ask students to write a list of triggers. What triggers you? What annoys you? What gets under your skin? And I ask them to scale those triggers on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, it's so annoying, it overwhelms me that I lose control. And 1 being, it's annoying, but it's manageable. And what I ask students to do is not to practice with those, and I'm going to encourage this, do not have students practice with those 10s, because you don't want to traumatize them or re-traumatize them. Practice with the 1s first and do a simple body scan every time you encounter those triggers. What you're doing is you're building resiliency, because eventually they start to rewire the brain towards whatever they're, for example, sitting in the math class, the trigger. And if it's a 1 or 2, they can practice it. And they're starting to rewire the brain towards the concept of math, where now I'm able to relax in math and I'm able to gain access to the higher parts of my brain and I'm able to learn. And then they start to realize, I don't know why I was so anxious with math. I mean, yes, it takes time to learn like anything, but it's doable, right? This is going to build resilience, because the more they build tolerance towards things that irritate them, the tolerance, they're able to now deal with more things in their life. So,
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much,
much,
Dr.
Dr.
Aubrey,
Aubrey,
for
for
all this
all the
information.
information.
I know
I know.
we're past the top of the hour, so
oh, my
just
apologies. I thought we had an hour and 15 minutes.
so I think we've promised everybody the top of the hour, so we'll
Oh,
we'll give
so
them a quick introduction here. Dr. Aubrey has several books out on the subject. I'm sure you're not surprised after hearing his work today. He has The Resilient Learner that you'll see on the screen there, and that's Thriving in College, Thriving and Succeeding in College. That's great for first year experience programs. And he also has a resilient learner book as well that is Thriving in College and Beyond. And he has among his books, there's I know a new one coming out regarding trauma. And so if you have any questions about that, I can see Dr. Aubrey has his email address available there. We'll make the slides available from today's presentation. They'll be available in the email that you'll receive after the webinar. And if you have questions about the Resilient Learner, you're welcome to contact Carla Lundman at Human Resources. Uh, and also, one of the things that we offer at Human Resources is customer care that is available is in support for both faculty members as well as for students when they purchase the online interactive book is the format that this is in. And so I wanted to thank Dr. Thomas for all of his explaining and the insight that you've given us today. It's certainly fantastic.